All right, everybody. So we are going to start with the Moon Regents questions, starting with review questions. Start with number one. So number one says, base your answers to the following questions on the diagram below, which shows positions of the moon and its orbit and phases of the moon as viewed from New York State. And so it says, during which moon phase might a solar eclipse, keyword solar, be viewed from Earth? All right. So when you have a diagram like this, okay, and we're talking about solar eclipses, when we talk about eclipses, it's good to know where is the Earth, where is the moon, and where is the sun? So always look at the Earth. The lit portion of the Earth lets me know that the sun is going to be located on that same side. So because the lit portion of the Earth is on the right side, that means that my sun is located right here. Okay. Now keep in mind the sun may not always be located on the right side. That's why you want to look at the lit portion of the Earth. Then from there, now is just a question of, okay, how is the moon positioned during a solar eclipse? And so if we look at our notes, right, during a solar eclipse, it shows right here that the moon is located between the sun and the earth. The moon is located between the sun and the earth. And this is a picture of, right, a solar eclipse. And what moon phase is that? That is a new moon. Okay. So the fact that the moon is located between the sun and the earth, that's going to let me know that if the sun is right here, oh, sorry. If the sun is right here, the earth is here, the moon is located between the earth and the sun for a solar eclipse, then the correct answer is going to be new moon, which is choice A. All right, so you do have to remember for a solar eclipse, right, the moon phase is a new moon, and the moon has to be located directly between the earth and the sun. All right, number two. Number two says, base your answers to the following question on the graph below, which shows the water levels of ocean tides measured in Boston, Massachusetts for a 2-day period. The graph shows that high tides occur in Boston every what? Well, if we look at our notes, right? And so this is a picture of a high tide. This is a picture of a low tide, right? The high tide, low tides are basically talking about the water levels, right? The water levels. So high tide represents high water level, right? Around the coast. So what do I also know? Just by looking at this diagram, right? High tide is right here. I'm just going to pick two consecutive high tides, right? Where the water level reaches its highest point, right here and right here. And when I'm looking at the time, right, if I was to give an estimate, this looks to be about, you want to say what, 8 a.m., right? 8 a.m., maybe 7 a.m. And then here at the highest point, it looks to be almost similar, right? It looks to be a little after 8 p.m. All right. So the fact that it looks like it goes from 8 a.m. to it looks like 8 p.m., it could be 8:30 p.m., right? That show me at the very least is showing me sometime over 12 hours, right? And that's why the best choice is going to be choice D. Now, in our notes, we also know, right, and this is just an estimate, that to go from whether it goes from a high tide to a high tide or a low tide to a low tide is going to be about 12 hours and 25 minutes. This is just an estimate, all right? If you're going from a low tide to a high tide or a high tide to a low tide, there's going to be a little over 6 hours. All right, this is just in our notes. But a high tide to a high tide or a low tide to a low tide is 12 hours and 25 minutes. Yeah, so the correct answer was definitely choice D. All right, number 3 says basic answers to questions 3 through 5 on the diagram below. So we know numbers 3 through 5 is going to be focusing on this diagram. You always want to read the background information. All right, on the diagram below, which shows the moon at positions A through H in its orbit around Earth. So keep in mind there are not 8 moons. These are just 8 positions as the moon is revolving around the Earth. So it says which letters represent, for number 3, which letters represent the two positions of the moon, when the least difference between the levels of high and low ocean tides occur on Earth. All right. So there are two different type of tides, right? You have spring tides and neap tides. So if we go to our notes, all right, here we go. All right. And this is a diagram right here that shows the tidal range, right? This is the difference between low tide and high tide, right? That's the tidal range. So when you have tides that are very high and high tides are very high and low tides are very low, when you have a very big tidal range, that means that it is a spring tide. All right. And a spring tide occurs between a full moon and a new moon. Now, what the question is saying, the question before was asking what happens when when there's a small difference, right? If we look at our question again, it says which letters represents two positions of the moon when the least difference between the levels of high and low tides. So that means my ranges are not going to be that high. So that means I need a tide where the high tides are not that high and the low tides are not that low, which means that my range is going to be very small. And so in a neap tide, we learn right here, in a neap tide, oh, there you go. Neap tides occur during first quarter moons and third quarter moon phases, right? And look at the position of where the sun is and where the moons would be, right? And first quarter moons and third quarter moons phases are basically where, there you go, are basically where you have half of the moon that's being lit up. All right. And so when I'm taking a look, I know my first and third quarter moon phases are going to be at C and at G. Because when I draw the moon phase, right? When I draw the moon phase, C is showing me that the lit portion of the moon is half, and G is showing me, right, that the lit portion is on the right and on the left. And so C and G represents neap tides, which represents where there's the least difference between high and low tide. So C and G would be your correct answer. All right, number 4. At which moon position could a lunar eclipse occur? So in our notes, a lunar eclipse occurs, right, when the Earth is between the sun and the moon. All right, that's something you have to memorize. In a lunar eclipse, the Earth has to be between the sun and the moon. Okay, and so when I look at my question, right, which moon position will the Earth be in between the sun and the moon, right? The sun is here, right? Because the sun rays are on this side, and the Earth is here. So the moon has to be right here, right? Because if the moon is located right here, then that means we get the moon, Earth, and the sun. All right. And as we just stated, if you look at your notes, right? The Earth has to be between the sun and the moon. It has to be between the sun and the moon for a lunar eclipse. That's why the correct answer is going to be letter E. All right, number 5. Number 5 says, how many days does it take for the moon to complete one cycle of phases as viewed from Earth? So how many days does it take to complete the lunar cycle? Well, in our notes, we learned this. All right. Oops. Oh my goodness. Don't tell me. I apologize, guys. Ooh. Sorry about that. There we go. We open the PDF. And it says right here, right? The lunar cycle, right? From the new moon back to the new moon takes 29.5 days. 29.5 days to complete a lunar cycle. So the correct answer is going to be 29.5 days to complete the lunar cycle. All right. So it says base your answers, number 6. Base the answers to questions 6 and 7 on the data table below and on the graph. The data table shows the maximum altitude and phase of the moon observed above the southern horizon on certain dates during January, February at a New York State location. The line on the graph shows the altitude of the noontime sun observed during the same time period as the same New York State location. All right, so they give us the data table. And question 6 says, assuming that February has 28 days, on which date in March did the next full moon occur? Well, in our notes, what did we learn? We said that the lunar cycle, oops, here we go. The lunar cycle takes 29.5 days to repeat its set of moon phases, 29.5 days. So we have to look and see when did the last full moon occur? So the last full moon, right here, it says February 18th. So that means 29.5 days later would be what? 29.5 days later would be what, right? So the answer they allowed, right? If you said March 18th, they would allow that. If you said March 19th, they would allow that. The answer key even said even March 20, they would allow that. All right, assuming that it has 28 days. So you know that at the very least, at the very minimum, it could be March 18th, right? Somewhere between 29 to 30 days. And at the very latest, it would be March 20th. So either March 18th or the 19th or the 20th. One date is fine, right? One of these dates is fine for your answer. All right, number 7. Number 7 says the diagram shows the moon's orbit around Earth. Place an X on the orbit to represent the moon's position on February 18th. Well, on February 18th, it was a full moon, right? Where you just saw only the lit portion of the moon, right? The full lit portion of the moon. So one thing that I do know, right? I have to find where would the moon be where I would only see the lit portion of the moon. So if I'm looking, right? If my moon was located right here, right? Half of the moon, we know the side of the moon that's not pointed towards the sun is dark. And if the moon was located here, I would only see all white, right? And the full moon represents when you only see just the lit portion of the moon. So that's one way to know that my answer would be right here. Oops, sorry. then my answer would be right here. Another way that I know that a full moon will take place here is because when I look at my diagram, all right, a full moon always occurs, right, when the earth is between the moon and the sun. A new moon occurs when the moon is between the earth and the sun. A full moon occurs when the earth is between the moon and the sun. All right. So that's one of the reasons why we know that we're going to place our X right here where full moon occurs. All right. And so that's something you do have to know. All right, everybody. So just please make sure, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. More videos on the way. Other than that, have a wonderful, blessed day. And I'll see you till next time. Peace.